Man, day removed from the Super Bowl and the blueprints on the table for how the 49ers can get back, finally get over the hump and win a Super Bowl. And they just have to take it from the Philadelphia Eagles. It's about drafting well, it's about addressing key needs and bringing them up and drafting players immediately. I mean, you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, right? Their biggest concern going into this season was their secondary. What they do, they use their first two draft picks on Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell. Those two guys were immediate impacts for this team, helped them win a Super Bowl. Cooper DeJean had a pick six last night. That could have been a guy that the 49ers could have drafted last year, but instead they drafted Ricky Pearsall. And here's the thing, in hindsight, that, drafting Ricky Pearsall, I mean, I'm not going to say that it was a fantastic move, but it was a good move, right? Like you drafted Debo Samuel's replacement, and Debo's expected to be traded now. So, like, in hindsight, I mean, I'm not going to grill them for that pick. However, in my opinion, I would have taken a guy like Cooper DeJean. That was a guy that you could have had as a Charvarius Ward replacement. However, they didn't, and they drafted Ricky Pearsall, and I think Ricky Pearsall is going to have a pretty productive NFL career and whatnot. And obviously, like I said, I mean, Debo's likely gone, or he will be gone. They're going to trade him, so you know. And then you look at like what Philly has done with their defensive line in recent drafts. Edge Nolan Smith that they drafted in 2023 first round pick. Jordan Davis, 2022 first round pick. Jalen Carter, 2023 first round pick. Milton Williams, 2021 third round pick. Moro Ojomo, I think that's how you say his name. Moro Ojamo, 2023 seventh round pick. Josh Sweat, 2020 or 2018 fourth round pick. And then obviously you got guys like Brandon Graham, that was a 2010 first round pick. But the blueprint's on the table. Like they have addressed needs in the draft, but not only have they addressed them, they have hit on these picks. And John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan haven't hit on as many draft picks as they should have. Um, it's just, and then like look at the Rams too. It's not only really the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, obviously it is because they just won the Super Bowl, but Philly's defensive line is all homegrown talent. You look at the Rams; they were in the playoffs this past season after using their recent picks on the defensive line, getting Braden Fisk and Jared Verse. Jared Verse just won Defensive Rookie of the Year. One thing that has been known and that was emphasized even more last night was you win Super Bowls by building your team through the trenches. And the 49ers, they've addressed their defensive line when needed in certain times to kind of build a pretty good defensive line. They did it last year. But the biggest thing is you also haven't hit on picks as well as you should have. And that's just a testament to how mediocre I think this team has drafted defensive linemen in the past, opposite or aside from Nick Bosa. But I mean, Philadelphia's got, three or four guys that made an immediate impact and a phenomenal impact in last night's Super Bowl. And they were not first round picks. Milton Williams was a third round pick. He had the strip sack. Moro Jamo, seventh round pick. Josh Sweat had a phenomenal 2.5 sack performance last night, and he was a fourth round pick. And the 49ers have drafted guys like Drake Jackson in later rounds, but they haven't hit on them. So, yeah, you can address needs all you want in the draft, but it's beyond that. You also have to hit on these draft picks. And I don't think the 49ers have really hit on as many draft picks as they should have. I mean, Philly really narrowed down the draft, picked the best players that they thought would make immediate impacts, and they hit on every single one of them. So the blueprint's on the table. I mean, obviously, you look at a guy like Jalen Carter last night. I mean, he had a pair of quarterback hits, was a game wrecker all night. He's an elite pocket collapsing run stopper. You know, And that's just as I mean, when you look at a guy like Jalen Carter, he's got just as, if not more value than any other position after quarterback. And the 49ers are in a good position this year with the 11th pick to draft one. Um, and I'll say this, I mean, the 49ers finding their version of Jalen Carter increases the impact of guys like Malik Collins and Leonard Floyd if they stick around. I have my doubts on Leonard Floyd. I don't know if he's going to be on the roster next year. I don't think necessarily that he is a guy that Robert Saleh likes as an edge rusher. And they also have the 11th pick where they could draft an edge rusher. But you can also draft a defensive tackle, and they need to figure out what position they're going to go with because they've drafted a guy like Javon Kinlaw that didn't work out. You know, they drafted guys in later rounds that just didn't work out. So it's not only knowing what your needs are, but it's actually hitting on draft picks. You know, the Niners took Ricky Pearsall last year in the first round, and they could have had a position. They're in a perfect position to draft a guy like Cooper DeJean, which last year going into the draft, cornerback was a bigger need than wide receiver. So I don't know, man. Sometimes I just question the way that the 49ers go into some of these draft classes. And, you know, obviously they've hit on big picks like Greenlaw and Fred Warner and Talanoa Hufanga was a productive player. Malik Mustafa seems like he's going to be a pretty good pick. Renardo Green, I think, was a pretty good pick for the most part. Diamador Lenore, of course. You know, they've hit on picks, right? But they haven't hit on as many picks as they should have. And I think that's why they haven't won a Super Bowl, to be completely honest. I think a lot of it's got to do with, you know, coaching and whatnot as well. But I think the biggest thing is they haven't really hit on as many picks as they should have. And I think that's probably why this team hasn't got over the hump. But the fact of the matter is the blueprint's on the table. The writing's on the wall. Philly gave you a blueprint of how you beat the Chiefs and get over the hump and how you create a team and build a team up to be a Super Bowl winning team. And the 49ers have attempted to do that in recent years, in 2019 to 2020, last year against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, but they haven't drafted well enough in order for them to get over the hump and win a Super Bowl. They haven't built the team in the right ways to win the Super Bowl. Last year, the reason they didn't win the Super Bowl arguably was because of how weak their offensive line was outside of Trent Williams. They have been cheap on this offensive line since Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have coached this team. And that needs to come to an end, man. Like, you have to have a good offensive line and a good defensive line to win the Super Bowl. And they've had good defensive lines, but it hasn't been good enough. And on top of that, they've kind of just put plug-and-play guys in at their offensive line, and it costed them a Super Bowl last year in overtime when they could have scored 7 points in overtime, but instead there was a blown coverage on the right side of the offensive line, and because they didn't elect to bolster their offensive line more, and it caused Purdy to throw the ball away. Chris Jones got to him, caused Purdy to throw the ball away, and they settle for a field goal, and the rest is history. They end up losing the football game. So if last night doesn't scream draft, build your team from the trenches and actually draft well in doing so, I don't know what does. And here's the thing. John Lynch knows that building teams start with building them in the trenches. The problem is he hasn't drafted well enough. This organization hasn't drafted well enough to win a Super Bowl. So, yeah, they know what it takes to win a Super Bowl, but when you don't draft well and you don't hit on draft picks, just because you know areas of need in order to win Super Bowls does not mean that you're going to do so. You have to draft well. So I don't know, man. I mean, the Eagles winning last night infuriates me more than ever because it should have been the 49ers last year to win the Super Bowl, but instead they didn't address their trenches as they should have last year in order for them to win a Super Bowl. This is going to be something I'm going to be talking about all offseason. I mean, you got a team like the Eagles who know what their needs are, and they immediately draft them in the draft last year. Darius Slay's getting older. What'd they do? Even though Darius Slay's still a productive player for the Philadelphia Eagles, he's getting older. So what they do, they went out in the draft last year. They used their 2 first picks on Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. And now they have their 2 cornerstone cornerbacks for years to come. And DeJean just had a pick 6 last night in the Super Bowl. Quinyon Mitchell really wasn't even targeted all game. I don't know, man. It infuriates me knowing that Philly did it the right way and they actually nailed down draft picks, hit on draft picks, and it paid off for them. And now the 49ers have to live with being the team that is 0-2 against the Kansas City Chiefs. And, they have to live with the fact knowing that one of their rivals in the Philadelphia Eagles did what it took to win the Super Bowl and did it the right way and drafted well. So, I mean, hats off to the Philadelphia Eagles. I can't stand the Philadelphia Eagles, but I'm also a guy that's realistic, and I'm going to give credit where credit's due. They've done a much better job than Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have done in terms of building their team the right way and hitting on draft picks, signing guys in free agency, doing what it takes to get over the hump and win a Super Bowl. And if the 49ers can't learn from that, maybe it's time for a new regime in San Francisco, because clearly this team knows what it takes to win a Super Bowl in the 49ers, but they're not drafting well and building this team the right way in order to do so. And I'm not saying that, this team and these players are the main reason that they haven't won a Super Bowl, but it's one of the main reasons. I mean, aside from them, I would say coaching is the problem. Kick it in gear, Kyle Shanahan and John. I mean, you guys have to you have to draft well. Just because you know areas of need does not mean that it's going to be fine. You got to draft well. You have to bring guys in free agency that are going to be key, immediate impact players as well as in the draft. So I don't know, man. I mean, obviously, it's one of those things where it's very hard to win a Super Bowl. It's hard to get back to a Super Bowl after you've already been there one time. But the fact of the matter is, you got a team like the LA Rams, who are not better than you on paper, that just went to the divisional round. They were a play away from going to the NFC Championship. And why was that? Well, I mean, their 2 most impactful players last season were Braden Fisk and Jared Verse. They hit on their 2 first picks in the draft. They hit on some of their biggest needs in the draft. And look what happened with the Rams last year. I mean, it was like Aaron Donald didn't even retire. They didn't even skip a beat. Why? Because who is it? Les Snead and Sean McVay hit on their draft picks. I don't know, man. It irritates the hell out of me knowing that this Philadelphia Eagles team actually built their team the right way, and it paid off, and they're Super Bowl champions. And here's the thing too: Howie Roseman and the Eagles, have the blueprint on how to build a successful roster, but it's not giving up draft assets. It's by nailing the draft assets and the draft picks that you already have, and the 49ers have not done a good enough job in doing that. What better way to do that and fix that than this year when you have one of the best defensive line drafts in all of football ever coming out this upcoming April? And not only that, it's not just the defensive line. I mean, the 49ers offensive line is in much worse shape, I think, than the defensive line is. Address it, fix it, do what it takes to win the Super Bowl. Because clearly what they have been doing and what they've kind of done to build a roster hasn't been good enough. Change some things up, actually address needs that you draft guys that are going to come in and be immediate impacts and day one starters. Until they do that, until they can draft well enough on the offensive line and on the defensive line and address free agency and really attack free agency and get guys in here that are going to be immediate impacts to this team, until they do those things, and until they do them the right way and actually draft well and sign the right guys, they're never going to win a Super Bowl. So gear up, Niner fans, because this is the most important offseason for the 49ers in probably I don't know. Since Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have came to the 49ers to be the GM and to be the head coach, I mean, it starts this year. And if you can't nail it down this year, I don't know how much time that John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have until their time's over. But the time is ticking, and it needs to start this year, this offseason. Super Bowl is at home next year. Freaking draft well, sign the right guys in free agency, address your actual needs instead of getting, hungry for skill position players that we don't need. Draft the right guys, address key areas of need, and win a Super Bowl that way. Eagles just did it last night. So let me know what you guys think of this in the comments down below. The blueprint's on the table. The Eagles Super Bowl win tells the 49ers exactly where their focus should be this offseason. And if they can't get it right this offseason, when you have one of the best defensive lineman draft classes ever coming out and some pretty high-quality offensive linemen, I don't know, man. If they don't hit on draft picks this year, my hope is just going to continuously go down. And I don't have a lot of hope anymore in this regime. But, I don't know. I think, a lot of my hope I have faith that they can do it, right? But I don't have as much faith as I should have. And until this coaching staff and this organization can prove me that they're truly hitting on draft picks and building the right team to win a Super Bowl, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think of this in the comments down below, but this irritates the shit out of me knowing that Philly was the team to do it. It should have been the San Francisco 49ers doing it last year, but they didn't build a good enough roster to win, and that's on them. So they're going to have to live with these results and figure out a way to get back by drafting well and by addressing key areas of need in free agency. So as always, go Niners. If you guys made it this far in the video, I've been rambling for a minute now, but I just had to get that off my chest because, they can learn from how Philadelphia won the Super Bowl. It pains me to say that, but it's the reality. So if you guys made it this far in the video, I greatly do appreciate it. Subscribe here if you're new. Turn on post notifications. As always, go Niners. I'll see you guys in the next one.